Sorry. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Um.
What?
Hopefully all that was heard, but basically all you need to know is
Yeah, that's supposed to be it.
that Dan is an awesome musician and he's a keyboardist and he's got the MT32 that he'll be showing you real quick. One more thing about Dan, he is starting to get into game music. He is working on, not only is he working on the Crimson Diamond, but he is working on Empire of Sin with Brenda and John Romero. And that is a pedigree of game designer that is just the top notch, super impressive stuff. And Empire of Sin will be coming out later this year, so hopefully you guys can check out some work of his. If you want to check out some of his work for the Crimson Diamond, if you go to Steam, I'm gonna actually, if that's something I forgot to do while Dan's talking, I will just put some links down in the video description. And there's a Steam demo that's free to download. When you launch the game, you'll hear the theme that Dan composed for the Crimson Diamond. And about midway through the demo, there is a dining room scene with a waltz, and he also composed that. And today we are hopefully going to start working on a new track, and I'm gonna pass it over to Dan. So Dan, we're gonna put you on, and now we
Okay.
have our camera. So go on.
Okay. Can you see? All right. Cool. So they can see us. Nice. So, first of all, thank you, Julia. It's actually really an honor to be a part of this project. And I have a passion for these games and just video games in general. If you can see, I don't know if you guys can see this from the background, but these are all big bucks PC games and video games. I mean, I'm a video game nerd from as long as I can remember. So I have a definite passion for adventure games specifically, and I picked up a couple off my shelf just to show quickly. I think most people that know video games will know this game. If you don't know video games, this is Quest for Glory 1. And this is one of my favorite games by this company, Sierra, probably my favorite, but it also uses a soundtrack composed for MT32. So that's one. Here's another one that you guys may know. This is the first Space Quest game. Also uses a soundtrack MT32. This is, I believe, the first game to use MT32 as part of the soundtrack, King's Quest 4. And this came out, I think, in 1987. Could be wrong, could be 86, but I think it's 1987. So, anyway, not to get too into and off the subject, but it's important to kind of know when the games were made and when this rolling box, which you can kind of see behind me here. Sorry, I don't have a nice camera on that, but that right there is the MT32, and we're going to be using it and making noise with it and hopefully composing music for a scene and also giving you guys kind of a background on at least what I'm thinking about and hopefully what Julia is thinking about as far as game design and music are concerned, because playing music on a stage with an artist is a lot different, shockingly, than playing music or composing music for a video game. And even that differs from composing music for something like a TV show or a movie. And in this particular instance on Julia's game, we're not using a lot of adaptive music just yet. And what I mean by adaptive music is the music changes based on what the player does in the game, right? So if the player, let's say the player walks into a different room and the music continues, but it shifts as that player walks into the room. So it doesn't shift until the minute that player walks into the room. Now, we haven't implemented a lot of adaptive music for this game just yet, but it may be something that we do down the road. So that's why games are just very different. So that means instead of being composed from a starting point to an ending point, it's kind of got these loops going on that all could be layered on top of each other at the same time, or nothing could be happening, or just you know, a very like a low pad or something. Just one note if you can hear that. Hopefully you guys can hear that stuff. Let me know if you can't hear that, because if you can't hear that, then we got another problem.
Oh
Yeah,
no.
so that's the MT32 that I'm playing right now, and I'm going to show you guys a little bit of the process of using it and um, just just some various little quirks that this box has. So the Roland MT32 was shipped and released in 1987, and Roland is still a big company. A lot of people love this box, and it's kind of a unique sound, but it was originally intended for musicians, and musicians were kind of like, this thing kind of sucks. But what happened was when it got incorporated with the video games that were being made, and specifically this company, Sierra, was probably the ones that really put this box on the map. Um, then it started having, a following. No, it was super expensive back in the day. I think it was $700 to buy in 1987. Not many people were spending $700 on something to make their video game sound better, especially when they were, spending very little money on well, they were spending a lot of money on the computer systems themselves, but not a ton of money on accessories like a thing that just plays music for games. So anyway, a lot of people now are able to get these boxes, and they're still relatively expensive, but compared to what they were, they've fallen in price quite a bit. I think you can get them for about 200 bucks nowadays. So that leads us into Julia's game, the Kernels, which is based off kind of, I would say, the art style and the um, the game itself is, it's not based off of Kernel's Bequest, but it's heavily inspired by it. Let's
Hmm.
put it that way, right? Does that make sense? Is that a
Yeah,
fair
100%.
assessment?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
definitely where my starting point was. Yeah,
right. So that game came out what year? 1988?
1989, I think.
1989. Okay. So it shared the similar art style. And of course, the premier way to listen to that music for that game would be on a Roland MT32. So that's why we made the decision to use the MT32 for this game. So, that said, let me show you guys a little bit of what I'm doing here, what I'm looking at. So, I don't know how many of you guys know what this is. This is Pro Tools. Um, and this is the software that I use to compose for the most part. Every once in a while, I have to use a different piece of software because, that's just the nature of the beast with some of these older boxes. Like the MT32 is extremely clunky. If I was doing a modern soundtrack, this would be about 1,000 times easier because it's just very difficult to and clunky to compose with, but that's okay. So I'm going to show you guys some of the stuff here. So basically the way I have it set up is I have 8 tracks. I think hopefully you guys can see my cursor here. I have 8 tracks, and each one of these, I'll show you, each one of these will play a different sound. Hopefully you can hear that. Let me know if you can't hear that.
Can hear.
So that's just various different sounds. Now, normally it's really easy in Pro Tools, especially with modern tools and modern plugins that people have made. It's super fast and super easy to just throw sounds and loops and beats together. When you're using a piece of hardware from 1987 and it's what they call pre-general MIDI, I don't want to get too deep into it. It's just really, really clunky to use. It's really difficult. And so most of my job here is actually kind of sometimes fighting with the hardware to wrangle it into doing what I want it to do. You know what I mean? So that's basically the challenge for me. The challenge isn't so much thinking up of the music, it's more kind of getting the sounds together and using only um, those sounds that are available on the MT32. And I wanted to show some software that I was using because it's really kind of a complex way of programming it, but I think it might be better if I wait on that and do that another time because it's just going to confuse me and probably everybody else to show it. But it's Windows 3.1 software. It's really old software that I have to use with an emulator. It's all kinds of crazy.
Oh, hey Dan.
So, yes.
For this part, the screen's a little bit small and or blurry, and I'm wondering if you would just have the can you do just the video on you so that we can make it much bigger?
Oh, yeah. You want me
Yeah,
to pin?
because I can just resize this down. It's gonna move. Sorry guys, I'm just gonna be moving it around as Dan. just sets it to be his screen only, because I feel like you were going to miss out on some of that detail.
How about this? Is that better?
That is, you don't like, you can just turn like can you turn off my video bit off, or
I don't know.
I wonder if I turn off video.
Should be able to pin it this way, and if you switch views from speaker view to gallery view, then they should be able to see it a little easier.
Oh, you know what? Maybe I can. Let me try speaker view. Okay, there we go. Perfect.
Okay, cool. So
good.
Now let's start talking about the theme itself, right? So can we maybe introduce the scene that we wanted? Because our idea today was to really kind of score a scene, which is to give you guys an insight into what we're both thinking about when we're trying to. So Julia is not a composer and I'm not a game designer. So we're trying to get into each other's heads and figure out what I'm trying to figure out what she wants out of the music, and then I'm also trying to figure out what is going to fit the scene, right? So, and then she's got to figure out a way to describe to me, even though she's not, a trained musician, what she wants out of that scene, at least somewhat in musical terms, if that's even possible. Now, a lot of times what happens is people use reference tracks, right? So, and this is something we were talking about last night. Julie and I were talking about this last night. So there's a couple of themes that you guys will probably recognize that I was just going to play quickly, just for fun. So this particular game, again, if we go, you can't see it, that's all right. But if we go back to Quest for Glory 1. Hopefully you guys can hear that song and recognize that song. Let's see here. I'm going to switch this camera view so you can see me too. Oops. Yeah, so you can see both of us. Anybody identify what that song is? Julia, you can cheat if you want and tell them. That song is built into my DNA. Yeah, so that's the theme. I guess it's a theme from Quest for Glory 1. And it's similar to another, not Dead or Alive Beach Volleyball, but that would be cool. It's similar to this. So this is the Quest for Glory 1 theme again. So, and then if you play another game that's similar era, I think actually came before, let's see. Anybody know that song? Space Quest. Nice one. I think that's Rick, right? Nice one, Rick. That's Space Quest. So they're actually two different games, two different composers. And Quest for Glory 1 came after, Space Quest came first. So they're pretty close to the same thing, but I think that's not a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. I think that's influence. I think it also sets the tone for the game. So you're playing a Sierra adventure game, right? Even though they're similar themes, they're not exactly the same, but they're very close. And they're taken from a reference point. So the Quest for Glory composer was Ken Allen. Am I right about that? Somebody will correct me if I'm not. Or did Aubrey Hodges do the first game? I don't know if he did the first game. Anyway, so the Quest for Glory composer took influence from Bob Siebenberg, who composed the theme for Space Quest. Right? So you could say, oh, well, they took that from Space Quest. You could say that, but I would say, you could say that they took it maybe possibly from another, what was the one? Superman. Or American Rabbit. That's a good movie. A good movie. That must be my brother. No, Star Wars. I don't know. Star Wars. It could be close. They're all pretty close to each other, right? And John Williams composed both Star Wars and Superman. But if you take John Williams and look at his influences, he's oftentimes taking stuff from Holst or he's taking stuff from Stravinsky. And there's a lot of videos on YouTube and articles written about how he's taken themes from other places and kind of adapted them for himself or for his purposes. All those guys are great. And I apologize that Mark Siebert did QFG1. Of course he did. He's awesome. So, and he also programmed, as far as I know, he programmed the sounds of the theme for Space Quest 1. So it's possible that I'm not exactly sure what their roles on the game were, but it's possible that Mark Siebert even was the one who actually input those notes into the MT32 and then implemented them into the game. So, with that said, I think we've covered a lot of territory, but let's try to see if we can show them the scene from the game and score it live. What
Right.
do you think?
Yeah. So, do you want me to show the clip with the music I had before?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure.
that would be
So
great.
we're gonna move over here. So I know that I don't know anything about music, and I don't have the words for it. I don't understand any of it. It's all magic to me. But I do know what I like and what I'm aiming for when it comes to the music. Um, I know that I want it to sound like an old school adventure game. Because of that, Crimson Diamond is set in Canada. I knew I wanted it to have a Canadian sort of folk tunish kind of sound, something to do with wilderness and something, it's a mystery game, so I wanted it to be mysterious. All those things. And the particular piece we're going to be scoring today is a piece that gets reused quite a bit actually in the game, which is kind of why it was a pure priority for us to get started on. And it's an eavesdropping theme, and that's because it's a mystery game. You kind of listen in at doorways and listen to people's conversations, and so I kind of I sent Dan what I'll show you now is there's sort of here's the mechanic, and we there is a bit of a theme that goes with that. And so this is a bit of music I had for it before. Oops, really loud. Sorry. Here it is. And I like it, and it does the trick. But I wanted it to be in keeping with the rest of the stuff Dan's already composed, which is the theme and the waltz. So you can see this is exactly the mechanic we're looking at here. And so that's pretty much all I gave him. And I'm with Dan. I listened to Dan actually on a podcast he did called the Music Production Podcast, I think, with Brian Funk the other day.
Yep.
And he talked about how actually limiting your options is really kind of liberating, and it helps you be creative. And for me as well, this whole idea of limiting my options was limiting the color palette I'm working with, limiting the style of game that I'm making. That really helps me to be creative. And so what I like to do is I like having when people ask me for something, I like to have as much information as possible, as much instruction as possible. I want to see screenshots. I want to have bits of music. Every single bit of information that I can get about what that person is looking for, I find really helpful. So when I started to show Dan some of this stuff, I felt the same way. Like he would want as much information as possible too. So that's this part. I'm going to turn off the music now and bring it back to Dan. Yep.
Yeah. And so to just jump in on that, it's kind of my job to get it, like I said before, get into your head and kind of think about what you want. And it's interesting because I've been working with John and Brenda Romero recently on one of their upcoming games. And I can't talk a lot about that, but I can tell you that it's interesting because I know for a fact John and Brenda have been designing games for a long time, are very experienced designers. And I just know for a fact that they know what they want, right? Whether they can describe it in musical terms or not is another story. But I know for a fact they're clear on what it is that they need for their game because they've just been designing games for so long. Doesn't matter what kind of game that we're working on, right? We could be working on a basketball game, a shooter. It doesn't matter. Obviously, both these games are set actually pretty close in time periods, oddly enough. But now Julia is a brand new game designer, so she hasn't worked with a bunch of musicians. So it's a different experience, but my job is still the same. Doesn't matter that she's designed 180 games or one game or whatever. It's my job is the same no matter who is working on it. So what I have to do is try to ask a lot of questions and get to the bottom. And the upside is Julia said, "Oh well, I have a lot of information I want to convey to people, and to convey to the composers to get exactly right what I want kind of the first time." So that scene is interesting, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so if anybody knows music, and this will be for the music nerds now, it's in 3/4 time, or waltz time, or something like that. So, and it's really basic. It goes from the 1 chord, if you know music, to the 4 chord. I think there's a 5 in there. So it's really, really basic. So the best way for me to do this, can we play the video of uh, that eavesdropping scene again?
Yep. Here we go. It's up.
Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, and before I go too far, this scene or this eavesdropping kind of theme will happen many times in the game, or is that something it's going to happen more than once in the game, right?
Yeah.
Right, right. So there's already a second time that it
Mm-hmm.
happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we could turn up the music, Rick. Fix
Turn up. Oh, you. Oh, that's on your side, right? Oh, you know
Yeah.
what? I can do that too. We can both do it. I bet it's too loud now.
Right. So we got to try to find something. So I think 3/4 time is a good way to start. I
Okay.
don't want to have too many waltzes in a game like this, but it might work.
Now, what about key? Because I know the different keys can give different feelings or sounds.
They can for people with perfect pitch, but I don't have perfect pitch, so I don't actually notice that to be a super big problem unless I was working with an artist singing on it,
Okay.
and then I would change the key for them to sing. But there's not likely going to be any singers on an MT32 game. But
No.
you know, since we don't have voice acting either.
Sounds a bit heroic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a perfect example, right? So that's not what we want.
Sammy Buckets wants to know if we know any Leonard Skinnerd.
I bet he does. We're not going to play any Leonard Skinner today.
Ooh. It's pretty good. Maybe it's a bit, I don't know, at this point in the game, do you think it's a little too tense?
Could be,
It
but at
seems
the
really
same time,
dramatic.
even I feel like in the game it kind of is dramatic though. Even
Yeah?
when I first listen in on the people.
Interesting.
Well, this is the question, right?
Hmm.
So it could be too dramatic, but I kind of like the starting point. So let's just use it as a starting point for now, right?
Okay.
So so I'm going to put in the tempo in Pro Tools. I don't know if you can switch back to the
Yeah,
other
I'll
screen.
still switch it back to you. And I'm going to put us in gallery again so that they can see your setup, your speaker view. I mean, there we go. that fitting well? Oh,
So I'm creating a click track, which will give me a good way of keeping time so I don't screw up the rhythm. Eavesdropping is illegal, so you should play the cops theme song.
is it illegal? Oh, I didn't even. Is that
I
a
don't know if
thing?
eavesdropping is illegal, but definitely being a peeping Tom is illegal, at least in this country.
I don't know. It's Canada in 1914. I don't know. Maybe there was like a landmark court case, federal government versus Peeping Tom.
I think
Song.
even in, I don't know, maybe I would think even back then there probably was some issues with that.
Brian Funk says using the cops theme, the song is illegal. So we're stuck
That's
whichever way
very
we go.
true. Inner Circle will want their money.
Oh, here we go. More talk. Eavesdropping is not illegal as far as I know, but recording it is illegal, says Stu. Anyone a lawyer? In some places, I don't know. I've been watching Better Call Saul, and in some places, recording without someone's knowledge is illegal. In some places, it isn't. Or one, I don't know. Not lawyer. Know less about law than music, probably. So what is this? What are all these?
So
What's
what
the
I'm
little
doing is
keyboard
I'm
and
trying to
everything?
set up a metronome because apparently my Pro Tools is not communicating.
I see. Hey, while Dan is working on that, let's go back to his let's go back to his slideshow, where I have some lovely.
Don't make them look at that again.
Did we even get through all of them? Because
I think we got it.
Oh! Now you do. Fine.
So.
All right, here we go. We're back.
That's kind of cool. Let's see. So I have a little bed. I'm kind of thinking of this as just like maybe one little part and then maybe like kind of a bass part next. Not that sound.
No.
Not that sound. Not that sound.
That's pretty good. That's not bad either.
Well, let's find a bass sound. So I have the MT32 instrument list here. And normally you could just look at the MT32 and do this, but it's really kind of time consuming to do that. So the bass sounds start at number 29. Not that that means anything to anybody unless they know the MT32. There's a synth bass at number 29 through 32.
I kind of like the pan flute that you had before. I know it's not a bass instrument, but it kind of gives like a breathy conversational tone, and it's also Northern Canada.
Well, we can add that in.
Hmm.
We can definitely add that in, because what I don't have is a melody yet. I'm just trying to lay the base layer, it's almost like building a house or building a cake or something. You start at the foundation and you kind of build up. Though in music, you can really start with anything and make it work. I like this little kind of vamp part we have because I think it sets a tone, right?
Yeah, because when you first do the eavesdropping and she walks up to the door to eavesdrop, we want something immediately that says this is a thing that you're doing. So that is useful to have that at the beginning.
Right. I don't know why that quantized wrong, but yeah, something like that might be cool. And so you'll set it up. So right now we just have that part. We have those two parts, but I'm going to try to arrange it so that it builds musically.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure if you've played Space Quest 3, pretty sure that's one of the sounds that they use right after the ship closes. The ship door closes when you crash into the garbage or salvage ship or whatever. That's a pretty cool. Just check it out later. See, the garbage freighter. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we've been trying to. Dan and I have been going through sound effects in the library and trying to avoid this too spaced questy pew pew noises in the.
So the funny thing about the MT32 is I think it lends itself really well to synth heavy stuff, which is fantasy games, which this is not, space games, which this is not, and what was the other one? Fantasy, space, and then like shooters. I guess those are kind of
80s cop games.
Yeah, all those things that have like really synth heavy stuff. This is just not it. This fits none of those, but neither does the Colonel's Bequest, and they have some wild sounds in that game as well. Let's record this.
Yeah. Stu says space fantasy cop game.
Yeah, cyberpunky.
Yep,
yeah.
Blade Runnery. This is that like a bass guitar or something? That
it's just a little part. It's not really a melody yet, but it's kind of I would call it a bass part, but I like to give bass parts melody, a sense of melody, so it's almost like something you'd want to listen to.
I don't know if I'm crazy about that twangy guitar.
Yeah, the sound. Don't worry about the sound just yet.
Okay.
Just trust me.
I don't know where I am in this, so yeah. Sounds
now,
like
this is the part. This
Seinfeld.
is the part where you're getting into my head. No, it does sound a little Seinfeld. We don't want that, but we like the line.
Yes,
we like the line.
We do. That's a bit synthy. Ooh.
So the other option is to not use a bass at all. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's got a little slow attack, so let's see if we can find something better.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, something not too heavy.
I like this sound 51, which is a
I
string
like that.
section.
Yeah, I like that. Bowser's Castle.
Kind of. Good ears, by the way. What does that one go? Same chords. Yeah, but we don't have to keep this. Just think of it as like a basic idea, right?
Dracula.
Dracula's cool. I like that. Dracula at least kind of fits the energy, right? Dracula
Kind of.
maybe a little older, but it's
Dracula kind of fits the energy for for this maybe. I don't want it. Yeah, I don't want it to get too gothic sounding. Too,
I agree.
Yeah.
So we could just yes, you can do attack, decay, sustain, release on the MT32, and I'd love to show that, but it requires librarian software, so you can't do it on the physical MT32. It's really complex, and maybe I'll show it if we can do this another time. I'll show it, but it's really not sexy, you know. A modern synthesizer, even older synthesizers that were control voltage, if you know anything about that, those worked better. This thing just really, the MT32 is just not set up to be programmed very easily. It needs software. And I think, well, I have to thank Brandon Bloom, another video game composer. He did the soundtrack to Mage's Initiation, and he also is working on the Cole's new game, Hero U Summer Days. Awesome composer. And you should check out that Mage's Initiation soundtrack and the game. They're both awesome. But he's the one who kind of hit me to the librarian software, and it requires Windows 3.1 running in DOSBox, and it's really complex. But as I did my research, I think the premier software that they used back in the day was Atari ST software, because a lot of people were using the Atari ST computer to compose soundtracks. And that was the particular librarian, I think, of choice. I'm not exactly sure what Mark Siebert used, but he would be one of the guys I would want to know, what he was doing, because he was there on the ground floor, I think. And also Al Lowe would probably know some of that stuff as well, if you know any of those guys. Al Lowe was the creator of the Leisure Suit Larry series, and he also did the original theme song. So let's go back to this.
Ooh.
You know what? What if we change this? What if we change the sound to this? Then it's not so gothic, right?
Yep.
Maybe if we can pull that bass volume back a little bit.
What kind of thing is that supposed to be?
This,
Yeah.
what sound is it?
Yeah. Like, what is it supposed to sound like? I know it sounds like an MT32, because I almost feel like this sounds like it sounds
I
like
think it's an electric piano of some kind.
Yeah, it sounds electric piano. I would say it sounds like an 80s, 90s. It sounds like a Miami Vice kind of sound.
Well, that's the tough part about the MT32,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a synth. So if we went for real sounds, it would be cool, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's not going to fit the atmosphere of the game so well.
Yeah. Like this, yeah, it's like a piano with like an echo. That's, yeah, I like that sound.
Can you put back the scene again?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks for watching, Rick.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rick. See, I like that. I like softer, yeah.
It kind of works. And you know,
Yep.
here's the question: do you really need a heavy melody going at this time?
Not
Maybe
really.
it's cool to give just the atmosphere.
Yep,
And we
it's
can
true.
also try this. So we have that kind of ding, ding, ding.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe we could try a pad that's just a held up. Yeah, so
Yep.
Anna, I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, this may or may not end up being the final thing that goes in the game. Hopefully it is, but we never know.
Well, the thing is, if it doesn't work here, it could work somewhere else.
That's also another possibility. No possibility of voice acting on an
No.
EGA text-based game, Stu. Come on.
That would mean it's like 30 discs in that box. It's not going to work.
381 floppy
Yeah.
disks.
You're just going to have to feed them into the drive just continuously as you're playing the game.
Stu likes that kind of stuff, though. He likes 800 discs in one.
It's like 5 pounds. Yep. The game cost $900. Yes, it's going to be
Big crate.
yeah, big crate. The Quest for Glory 2 box. Yeah, the Quest for Glory 2 box had the 3 1/4 and 5 1/2, 5 1/4 and 3 1/2 discs in it. I have that box.
Exactly.
See, I like that soft sound. Yeah.
Pretty cool, right?
Yeah, because I kind of feel like it would be what Nancy's feeling and thinking. Kind of, she wants to be quiet and she also feels this mood. Hmm.
No, we had Pro Tools crash.
Oh
Dear.
no.
And this is part of the bugs. This is actually not really MT32's fault, although it looks like it got a stuck note. So hopefully that's saved. And you see the MT32, I just shut off Pro Tools and I'm going to restart it. But the MT32 is hanging a note, so I got to restart it.
Okay, well, we can put it back on the the slideshow of pictures of you and.
No, it should just take 2 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not like all day. But yeah, that welcome to the world of music composition in 2020. Everything, you have every option available, but the stuff crashes all the time still, especially software programs.
Well, especially with like something like the MT32, I guess, where it's not meant for those things.
Well, yeah, it is, but it isn't. Yeah.
What about something like the cave music from Super Mario World? Boom, 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 boom. Hello, that owl guy.
So we have a backup that saved 2-3 minutes ago, so it should be okay. Now, the only thing that happens is that for some reason Pro Tools doesn't like using MIDI banks, especially this version I'm using, Pro Tools 12.5, because it's a super old thing to do. Most people just don't do it anymore. They're not using a lot of outboard, meaning actual hardware. They're using a lot of stuff that's just software, and the software just works better, you know. So we'll see what this ends up sounding like once I play it back.
All right, should I put your scene back on? So what have we got?
So no, it's pretty good.
Cool.
So it didn't save my last change. Let's see. Now, did anybody notice I changed the chord and the bass line is not agreeing with the chord? No? Any good ears out there?
No.
I'm going to fix that now, but I did it on purpose.
Oh. I can't even tell if something's coming in stereo or not. You know me, so no help.
So I'm labeling it. You can see that there. Let's see. And if we can get it quiet and subtle enough, I think it'll fit really well. So now we have a little bit of a chord change there. So now that equates to about 30 seconds of music, right? So you can decide two things. Now, can you play back the scene again? And we'll watch it and kind of listen to this.
All right, let's do it.
And we'll see what else we want to do. Okay, cool. So it is a little bit sinister, but you know what? We have an option too. So what would kind of be cool, and this happens in a lot of video games, I would say, and movies as well. So sometimes you have a theme that's the same. Ooh, maybe some clarinet bassoon melody to go on top. I like that. I like that a lot. I think the clarinet sound really works, and the flute sounds work really well too. But what happens is sometimes you can have a theme like, let's see, play it on a different sound so we can kind of hear it. So we could do it. What if we did this? That doesn't quite work. So you'll have a theme that happens throughout maybe an entire movie or an entire
Mhm.
game, and then when there's a change, like this in this case, we're doing right a different mood, retro rent salsa, different mood. Yes, so I'm in minor versus major, and
Mhm.
that for a lot of people equates to happy or sorry, sad, happy, minor, major. It's not always exactly like that, but that's kind of what it equates to. So minor maybe even has a mystery vibe to it. We could also choose something that's even more basic. We could just go with a, but I didn't think that would be too interesting to watch somebody compose, me holding one note for
Th
45 seconds or something like that.
Yeah, that one's
No,
a
I like
bit too
yeah,
brr.
it's something it's not gonna exactly
Mhm.
accomplish what we're hoping to accomplish. So let me look. Clarinet. Let's try clarinet because that would be kind of cool. Flute is 73, clarinet is 83. So let's try one of those patches.
Yeah, I like the flute clarinet sounds like that. I mentioned the pan flute before. You dabbled a little bit there too. Mhm. Mhm.
So that's the flute. They
Mhm.
both kind of work to me. I think the
Mhm.
flute might have the subtlety that we're kind of looking for. And what was the other one you said, like pan
Yeah,
flute?
pan
So
flute. It's very northern Ontario.
could work. Let's try that. I like that first flute though. That kind of had a
It's pretty
sound to me.
good.
It was subtle. Because I would say we're trying to be subtle, right? What we're
Mhm.
trying to project in the scene is if we're the player, we're in Nancy's shoes. So what are we
Mhm.
doing when we're um, listening to somebody else's conversation? We're kind of being sneaky. We're kind
Mhm.
of being subtle. We don't really want to be discovered because that's
Mhm.
not the point. Yeah, I like the flute too. Let's see. Let's play some of this.
So that would almost be like her. That flute bit would kind of be what she's feeling while
You
she's
could
listening
call
to
it that.
this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you could call it that. One of our friends, Francisco Gonzalez, also a great game designer,
Mhm.
has made a game called Lamplight City, working on a game called Rosewater. But he was the one who kind of suggested to me, he's like, oh, I could get behind something if you were working on leitmotifs. And if anybody studied music, leitmotifs they come from Wagnerian opera, or at least that's where I believe they come from. And basically they're like a theme, probably they predate Wagner. Um, that comes in at a certain time. So like, if you've ever heard Peter and the Wolf, like each animal had their different theme and different
Mhm.
instrument that went along with it. The bassoon represented one instrument. The uh, whatever it was. Golden Wake, that's another good game. Nice ones too. And Shardlight. So yeah, Peter and the Wolf is like the best example of kind of leitmotifs that kind of cross over each other. So basically what you're doing with a leitmotif is this sound represents Nancy, or this
Mhm.
melody represents Nancy, or this melody would represent Nessa, or this would represent Margot. We haven't really got into that super deep here, and I'm not sure that it makes a ton of sense to do it because there's so many characters in a small space.
Yep.
So if we were originally thinking about doing something like that during the dinner scene, and I was like,
Mhm.
okay, so there's how many characters?
Yeah.
8 characters.
Yep.
And they would have to enter when the
Right.
character switches talking. So either on a timer or when the
Mhm.
player presses the enter key or
Mhm.
escape key or
It's
whatever
yeah,
it is
it's a
to
bit too
skip,
much.
clicks. Right. It's just like chaos, right?
Yep.
So we could do something like that here though, and this might be the eavesdropping leitmotif. So we know that there and think about it in some of the other games if you know. I think that's Space King's Quest 3, right?
Yep.
Or
Yep.
when the wizard appears on PC speaker, so it's a lot worse sounding. Right. With Godfather, that's kind of a interesting. That's a theme though, not so much a leitmotif, right? It's a great theme. But yeah, let's try to think of like this is that. So we have an eavesdropping theme almost, or an eavesdropping melody. So maybe as the game progresses, and I don't actually know, and probably Julie hasn't doesn't know all of it because the game's not finished. How those things are going to progress as you eavesdrop, excuse me, in different scenes throughout the game, right? So early on in the game, there's some tension, but it's probably not as great as it might be later on in the game,
Right.
right? So let's try to find something.
Mhm. Yep.
So,
I really like that. I really like that actually.
yeah, so something like that. And there's an interesting point that I brought up in a composition. I teach this kind of music production and songwriting course to a bunch of students weekly. And a lot of times they're always like looking at the instrument and trying to get the melody and things out of the instrument. I'm trying to think of it in my head before I play it. Right. I think that's the best way as a musician, as a composer, to get your ideas out because you can actually get out musical ideas that you might not otherwise, think of or even be able to play. So you're not limiting yourself by your ability to play an instrument.
Mhm.
You're limiting yourself by what you can hear and imagine.
I really like this.
Something along those lines, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I really, really, really like that.
Cool.
The folk music angle of what I was looking for is yeah, like limiting the amount of instruments we're using, like keeping it pretty simple, and keeping it to things that might be more folksy, like the instruments. I know it's hard to talk instruments when we talk MT32, but giving
No,
that
but it's
sound,
cool.
yeah,
So here's a good example for anybody watching this to like there. I just saw that you guys are talking about it's cool to see indie developers. And I'll just say that in a AAA or large game studio, or even some smaller indies, they have NDAs, so they're not allowed to talk about anything related to their games that they're
yeah.
working on, right? Unless it's already been talked about until the game's released, and then sometimes even not after the game's been released. But we have the luxury, since Julia is the sole designer, CEO, creator, um, artist, cleanup, janitor, everything. She can decide, who gets to share in the process and who gets to not share in the process. So it's nice to be able to share with a community that's watching it, watching the game, and I kind of like this process too because it gives us some insight into and feedback, immediate feedback.
Hmm.
We're in the neighborhood.
Hmm. Hmm.
See, now that's weird. You could do that. It's kind of weird sounding. That's maybe better.
More like that, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we mentioned playful and curious in the chat here. Peevish Dave said that at some point you added more dynamism, and it gives it a more curious character to
As
this.
opposition to a sweet character. Interesting. Yeah. So do you know what the way I would translate dynamism? I'm not sure exactly if that's a musical term, but dynamics is probably what I'm hearing or I'm assuming. So dynamics are like usually related to the volume, right? So you sometimes having a great dynamic range means like
Okay.
going from loud to soft or soft to loud or whatever. That's a very, very slimmed down way of describing it, but I want to kind of make it so everybody can understand that's watching. But yeah, so and it's tough again on the MT32 because it's limiting
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what you can do volume wise. If we were actually programming this back in the day, a lot of stuff that I'm going to do when you finally hear this soundtrack, it's going to fix a lot of the problems that you would have had back in the day playing it back via MIDI, because sometimes the MIDI messages just don't translate when there's all that game information going back and forth and the MIDI information data is trying to be sent back and forth. And back, in the 80s, late 80s, that was a lot of information for a game to handle. Now it's a joke, but we're, not doing a triple A title with huge orchestral scores and all of these things. We're doing a throwback to 1989, right? In EGA, the art style, the
Mm-hmm.
music style, and all these things, as we've talked about. So, okay, so sorry. I mean, like the melody becomes a bit more complex in short section. So, yes. Now, here's the thing about this. What we have here, I like. Let's just listen back to this. Thanks for watching, Retro Rensal. Now, can we play back the scene?
Yep. Yep. Here we go. I've got it back up.
And here's another interesting piece, right? We have to kind of decide how this song is going to build. So Nancy's walking around in the hallway, and then boom, you see this little cut scene.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, So it's almost like maybe we can play a little intro sound.
Mm-hmm.
And then the theme starts.
Yeah, I think in the version of the demo that's out right now, I think that there might actually be something like that right now.
A point noise or something like
Yeah,
that.
there's some kind of noise and
Right.
then that. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of times this is something that's important in games.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
These little noises that are cues to the player to know that something's happening or supposed to happen, or you've scored a point, or you've got the right idea, or you're on the right track.
Mm-hmm.
This has been going on in games forever. Can you restart this scene one more time?
Yeah, just I'm gonna switch and then there we go. Oh, yeah, there we go. Oh, hold on. I have to restart. It doesn't restart. Give me a second. Restart when source becomes active. It should have. Hold on.
Oh, that's all right. You can leave it. You can play it.
There we go.
There it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll wait for her to walk over and I'll hit the thing. So the idea is that when you wouldn't hear this music start until you see her look, until you type listen and you
And
see
press
her
enter.
looking through the doorway.
Right.
Yep. And then boom, it would start. So maybe what you could do in that case, you could just hold a low note as soon as that little text bubble appears, a thought bubble. And now you can hear, you can't hear, but you can see what they're talking about, and hopefully this part will kind of give you an idea. Of course, locating whatever, and we're talking they're kind of talking about something. I don't know if it's super sinister yet, but it's definitely giving you clues into the game
Hmm.
that something's going on, that these two are plotting something, right?
Hmm.
And we don't want Julia to reveal any spoilers, but this is not a spoiler. This is all available right now.
Hmm.
You could download this and play it.
Yep.
You can play the demo on Steam. You can play it on itch.io, right?
Yes. Yep.
Cool. So maybe can you type this the Steam links and stuff in there for
Yeah.
everybody in
Yeah.
Twitch?
Absolutely. Let me grab one.
But I think we have at least a little piece of this theme.
Yep.
So I mean, it's already actually 10 minutes. We're already 10 minutes over our time. So if we
Hmm.
want to keep going, we could for a little bit, but I was thinking maybe this is a good point to stop and, kind of pause it and then um, go from there,
Awesome. Just gonna
you know?
quickly grab these links for people.
Yep. So yeah, if you guys haven't played this, you should. It's free right now.
The demo
And
is free.
we're
Yep.
we're hoping to release it 2020.
Yeah. Hopefully late this year, but we'll see. Things
Yeah.
change so much.
The development, and listen, we all know what's going on. It's crazy out in the world, but the idea is two things. Really, one, to give you guys an idea of how this process works, but also to give an escape from everything that's going on right now. And this is kind of, it's been helpful for me to find these little Twitch things and Zoom things and all kinds of different teleconferencing, and be able to be together and be positive is kind of a really important thing for especially a musician who can't do any shows right now. That's something
Hmm.
important for me to be able to do, and share this stuff um, with everybody. So thank you guys a lot for watching us. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And this will be on YouTube. Are we going to keep it on YouTube?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Cool.
when we're done here, it should be still up there for anyone to watch after the fact. If you came in a bit late, the whole thing should be up. And yeah, hopefully, I don't know if we can do another one of these at some point. We'll have to talk about it. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming. I learned a lot just watching Dan. I haven't gotten a chance to watch this process either, so it's been.
I don't think anybody does. I think a lot of the music that gets composed now is remote.
Mm,
And Brenda Romero made a really important point to me the other day. She said, well, you could have 400 people working on a game, and one composer could do the work for the entire game that it took 400 other people,
mm,
to make. So you might have 10, 20, 30 designers, a whole bunch of programmers, a huge amount of artists, and the it's kind of limited with the audio people. And she actually, if you've read her book, which I have, called breaking into the game industry. Is that right? I have it here. Yeah, breaking into the game industry. And it basically talks about all the people at some point on a game development team like want to get at each other's throats because of how much work they're doing all the time and how much passion they put in, except for the audio people because they're not around very much. So that's kind of why probably most often a game designer wouldn't interact that directly with a composer or an audio person. They do, but a lot of it happens back and forth, via email and remotely. Because obviously, for anybody that doesn't know, I'm in New York and Julia is in Toronto, and we've only hung out from it maybe one time in Boston
hmm.
at the PAX East show.
Hmm.
So we're working almost entirely without ever being in the same room with each other. Now it's different because it's a solo dev effort, right? So it's more Herculean on her part because she's responsible for everything. But on the flip side, it's nice for us because we can communicate back and forth very easily and kind of share ideas and try to express our thoughts. And our goal is the same: to make the best game possible, to make the best music that fits the best game possible, right?
Hmm.
So that's really what our goals are, and that's it's my passion to be working in music, number one, and then video games is my other real passion. Is, like I said, as you can see on the wall, you got keyboards and video games, and there's not much else down here in my basement with me.
Well, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but leading into what you're saying about showing this stuff and talking about it, is Dan is actually starting a podcast with his friend John Spinosa called
Yes.
Artist A to, well, in Canada we'd call it Artist A to Z, but I suppose over there you're calling it artist A to Z. But
Yes.
yeah, you guys are starting that up. I'm not sure. I'm sure you can talk a little bit more about that. But yeah.
Yeah, well, we've actually put up, I don't know if we premiered our first episode, but we've recorded a few episodes. The sad part is a lot of the things that we're going to talk about and are talking about, some of them at at the moment don't apply because
Hmm.
unfortunately, somebody like me who does the majority of their work performing for a living, I'm not in a position to be able to perform live with a band. I could do it on the live stream, which you guys saw here tonight, but it's just not exactly what it's not exactly where any of us thought we'd be at this point in 2020. Let's put it that way, right? So it's it may or may not be on hold for a little while, but we're going to try to release it because it relates to music, music production, composition, and really the development of an artist, which is a totally different animal from what we're talking about here. But I would like to talk about game design and game audio and things like that as well on the podcast as we get going. So again, thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you hopefully on the next one.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good night. And yeah, see you next time whenever